So we have a new warning sign, and warning sign with respect to the economy. Hello, everybody. I'm Fabian for Liberty. Check out fabianforliberty.com. And there's a few things that I want to cover today. Again, warning signs in the economy, the way people are going to react, just like they have in history. This is yet another example. I think I've done like at least a few of these in the last couple of weeks. But here we have Paul Krugman. If you don't know who Paul Krugman is, you know, most of you that watch this channel are informed, are in tune, are in touch. So you know who he is. He's the guy who looks like a little elf that basically goes on mainstream media TV talking about how great it is to have reckless government spend all kinds of money. There is no, responsibility. They could deficit spend forever. Quantitative easing is fantastic, and so is Ben Bernanke. I mean, this is basically what this guy believes. Now, that would be funny if it wasn't a fact that he has the ear of the President of the United States and is somebody who basically sets policy with government officials. I mean, people actually listen to this guy and believe what he has to say. He also was considered for Treasury Secretary, which gives you an idea how out of touch current elected officials are, specifically the Obama administration, with sound economic philosophy, sound economic principles, and just the whole idea of don't spend more than you take in. And if you do, you can't do that forever. And you certainly can't debase your currency because we have thousands of years of recorded history to tell us that doesn't end too well. So Paul Krugman, again, this would all be funny if it wasn't for the fact he's taken seriously. Recently, and remember, Paul Krugman was a guy who came out championing Obamacare, how we needed it, how it's great, how the notion of death panels was totally not true, that we wouldn't have to raise taxes. Yet, about maybe 3 weeks ago, he was caught on tape at a lecture he was giving in front of people, talking about how, you know what, we're going to have to ration care, and we're going to have to think about how we deal with Grandpa getting that extra surgery. We might have to give him the painkillers, and we might, in fact, have to just make sure that he dies so we don't spend money providing care to him. Also, he was on record basically saying middle class tax hikes are coming, something Obama has claimed he's against. Now, remember, if you're new to my channel, I'm not about Republican or Democrat. Both of them are just as evil. They're just as bad. I'm singling Obama out and have mentioned him in this video, like I did with George Bush, when he was in office. They're both in on it together. There is no fundamental difference between the two. The rhetoric's just different. So Paul Krugman has recently come out. The reason I'm talking about him, and what is another warning sign, is he's recently coming out in the New York Times saying that basically we need capital controls in America. Now, I've been talking about capital controls for probably 2 years. In my Global Collapse Assured video, I talked about it. And the whole idea of MF Global, when that whole Ponzi scheme collapsed, I talked about capital controls. Capital controls are currently underway in Italy, where they have bomb-sniffing dogs on the border to Switzerland, making sure people aren't leaving with capital, leaving the country. In countries like Greece, countries like Spain, you could only take out so much money from the bank. In Cyprus, I think you could take out $100 or $300 from your ATM account. So they stop the flow of capital and they control capital. Now, how would that happen in here in America? To an extent, it's already happened. Last year we had FATCA, which was passed, that made it very difficult for anybody to have an offshore bank account. Or, in fact, they put such regulations on Swiss bank accounts and other offshore havens that many of those offshore havens don't even want to deal with Americans as a customer because they don't want to deal with the compliance and the regulation that the IRS and the federal government has now put upon these companies to have to deal with. So capital controls is underway in that respect. It's underway with, you could only withdraw $500 from most ATMs. You go into any bank telling them you need $10,000 in cash, even though you have the money in your account. They basically treat you like a terrorist. Everybody goes nuts, and you're lucky if a few hours later you have your money. Now, this is a form of capital controls, but it's not as hardcore. Nixon did capital controls in the past. The way they sell this is that it's good for the American people. Just like, hey, we're going to take your guns. It makes our kids safe. This is how government works. It's a bad policy. They say it's going to make you safer. They pass it anyways. You get screwed. That's what happens. Now, he's also saying, Paul Krugman, that the last crisis and the current crisis isn't caused by out-of-control government, failed stimulus packages, Ben Bernanke's debasement of the currency. No, it's caused by foreign money coming into the market and foreign speculators who caused the last housing bubble. That's very key, because one of the things, if you well know, if you followed my Resourceful Real Estate Academy, if you've seen the recent microdoc that I put out, I'm believing that over the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to have housing prices begin to surge again, like we're seeing the stock market, because of all the manipulation involved in the market, all of the foreign capital that's moving into the market, not to mention hedge funds moving into the market, private equity firms. I mean, they're throwing literally hundreds of billions of dollars at real estate right now. You wouldn't know that unless you were on the front lines of it, but that's just my world that I live in. I'm sure certain things like that happen in the stock market and other asset classes as well. So this is a warning sign, because we know that in the crisis, in the next crisis, whether it's Obama or the guy who comes in after him, if there is another president, will say we need capital controls in America to, basically stop the bank runs, to stop bank collapses, to stop the, economic collapse that is underway. That's coming, and what that means to you is you might have to deal with the situation that's going on in Cyprus, where people can't access your money, or they just go in and take your money. Now, that brings me to Cyprus, because today we found out that, and again, this is what they're claiming. I don't know if this is true. Based on everything I have seen, I believe it is true. Of course, probably nothing will happen, but the Cypriot president, 3 days before the bailout, 3 days before they, in essence, robbed people's savings account, anybody who had over 100 euro, they in essence took that money. He transferred 21 million euros to a London bank. This is so criminal, and reminds me of the Prime Minister of Greece, the old Prime Minister, Papandreou, I think it was, whose family basically ruled Greece. And they were doing it basically the same thing. I mean, they had all kinds of money through his mom. They were funneling money offshore, just like most of the elected officials have assets offshore. And the truth is, I don't blame them, because I think having assets offshore is a good thing in light of a government that's totally criminal, totally out of control. What's interesting in this is that it shows you what I talked about the other day, that in the new economy, it will be ruled by a few groups. One of them are the globalist elites, which I would throw this guy in. I haven't done that much research on who this guy is as a person, but I would suspect he runs in those circles. Or the other group will be the innovator, entrepreneur, etc. Right? If you're not in one of those groups, you're probably not going to be doing too well in the new economy, because the economy is fundamentally changing, and it's just a matter of fact. So he basically bails himself out, bails his own money out. And what this shows to me is that the IMF, big banks, they're in on it, because they've allowed this to happen. Remember, it's the IMF who created this whole take the people's money to pay for this bailout. They came up with that plan. Who funds the IMF? 40% of their contributions, of their financing, comes from American taxpayers. So it is this cabal of just authoritarians with these, big banking cartels that basically run everything. They create the laws. They create, they buy the politicians. And unless you opt yourself out of the system, you're going to be involved in that system, and you're going to have to play by their rules, and their rules suck. It's like the old Jim Rohn adage. Jim Rohn, if you don't know who he is, he's a very well-known American business philosopher, personal motivation or personal growth philosopher. And he basically nailed it when he said he's passed away he passed away a few years ago. But he said that if you don't have a plan for your own life, chances are somebody else will have a plan for your life. And there's a pretty good likelihood that you're not going to like the plan they have for your life. And that is so freaking true, I can't even tell you. So lastly, I just want to say that I think the Cypriot president is pretty much will end up dead, found somewhere dead. The Russian mob will likely take him out. It's estimated that Russian account holders lost over 20 billion euros in this whole, basically stealing people's money. That's not going to go over too well. So here is another warning sign for you. Share this video with your friends, family that need to wake up. Tell them, what is capital controls? What does that mean? What are these people actually saying? Because they're saying it, they mean it. Also, check out FabianForLiberty.com. Thanks for watching. I'm out.